Melee weapons in Criminality are nearly half of the weapons currently in the game, and they've changed quite a bit since the start of the game, going from being an absolute infinite ammo powerhouse that took insane levels of game sense and skill to use correctly, versus now, where they still take an insane amount of skill, but are completely overshadowed by the guns. Melees are ridden with bugs that make them unusable, dumbass design choices, and some of the worst hitboxes you'll ever see in a game. A lot of people in Criminality's community like to say that melees are fine the way they are, but as someone who's used these things since the very beginning, and is still amazing with them now, I am telling you that these weapons are very underpowered and need to be seriously looked at again. These weapons have been so neglected for years now, and it's never sit well with me, so what's wrong with melee weapons? Issue number 1. Guns are just too powerful and too easy to use. It's controversial to tell the egomaniacs that play this game that guns are not difficult and take no skill, but it has to be said. Guns were nowhere near as powerful back then as they are now, and they actually required a bit of skill since they had this little nifty feature called recoil, but in current day Crim, if you somehow get the jump on someone with a melee and they have the weakest gun in the game, all they have to do is hipfire and there's a very high chance you're going to die. Hell, the best counter to melee weapons is a shotgun, and you can buy a shotgun in this game for $175. And this shotgun almost always one-shots. A lot of people like to say the fire axe is the best melee weapon. I disagree. I think the sawed-off shotgun is actually the best melee. But seriously, how are people expected to use melee weapons effectively when the best counter is cheaper than most of the good ones and is way easier to use? And other guns are just so powerful, it's not even fair. The AK-74 is so brain dead any moron with a functioning mouse can use it effectively, and it shreds melee users. A lot of people just say use stun grenades or rage dose against guns, but if I have to use an entirely separate item to make an entire weapon category usable, I think that says enough about how underpowered they are. I mean, even then, these items pair better with guns instead, because if you rush someone with a stun grenade, they might still be able to hipfire and shoot you. However, if you were using a gun, that wouldn't be an issue. They couldn't even aim at you. And Rage Dose is just way better with guns like shotguns. Using Rage Dose for some reason doesn't make you unable to be one-shot by shotguns, and you'll just get shredded by automatics. Issue number 2, the hitboxes. I don't know what the hell happened to this game's melee hitboxes, but they are absolutely miserable. You finally managed to get the jump on someone. You're ready to eat up that gigantic bounty. You raise your bat into the air and it just fucking misses, even though you saw it go right through him. And if you're paying attention to the footage in the background, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The issue is your natural instinct with a melee weapon is to get as close as possible, but in Criminality, this is a horrible idea, because for some reason, the hitbox will just go right through the target. This is most noticeable on the metal bat and the shovel. You'll often just swing right through them. The fix here is obvious, but RVZ has just chosen not to fix it. And sometimes the melee hitboxes just do not work at all. The debug will show up as green and literally not deal damage. How in the fuck does this happen? Like, seriously. How does this happen? These melee hitboxes genuinely need to be remade on most of them. And the ones I'd say that are fine right now are the knives and the axe. These have the lowest chances of just failing randomly, but the bat and the sledgehammer need to be fixed because they are just awful. Issue number 3. Any player can just walk away from you. For some reason, the Crim devs thought it was a fantastic idea to make you slower with all the melee weapons and also make it so if you literally chop someone's leg off, they aren't any slower, but if you break their leg, then suddenly they're slower. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, well, just buy a soda from the vending machines. That would be a good idea, but Criminality's stamina system is weird. When running, it seems as if it drains faster if you run for longer periods of time, so using a soda effectively does nothing in helping you try to catch up to someone. I mean, legit, this is actually the best case I have for melee weapons being useless, because anybody can just walk away from you, and you can't do anything. Issue number 4. Guns are just too cheap and easy to get. Back then in 1.2, not everyone was able to buy an AK or an M4, but the fire sale update effectively made every gun free. And if you can't afford a gun somehow, you can get a free weapon off of the spawn crate. That can be a sawn-off, or a Beretta, or a Tech 9, or a Glock, which are all great counters to melee weapons. I think melee succeeded more back then just because it was harder to get guns from scraps. But now, I mean, you're basically just given guns at any time. Back then, you had to use what you could find, and that was typically a melee weapon. Guns were sort of treated as a rarity to be found for free. So, those are the issues regarding melee weapons and why I think they're completely useless. But if you're really willing to put the effort and use these things, because they're much more fun and harder to use than guns, I'll give you guys some tips on the melee weapons. I'm not going to cover every melee since I believe some of them are just meant to be bad, but let's start off with my favorite, the fire axe. This is the only melee weapon to avoid being absolutely useless, and that's because it literally one-shot kills to the head. Yeah, this thing in the right hands isn't much of a pushover like the other melee weapons. The biggest counter to the axe is good movement. You need to be able to predict where they're going to go, and make sure you aim high so you have the highest chance of hitting their head. Once you get the rhythm of how people move around, you'll be pretty unstoppable with the axe. And let people rush you when using the axe. You're most advantageous when the people are pushing you and making themselves an easy target. Next up, the metal bat. This thing has such a perfect rhythm and is very satisfying to use. It can block basically everything besides the axe and the chainsaw, and the main tactic you want to use is first aim for the head, knock them down, and then the second swing, aim for the head again and break their neck. If they're being tricky, you might need to prep a third swing and instantly break their neck with it. This is a good weapon against armor since it still knocks them over even if they have a helmet. The katana relies almost entirely on its third swing mechanic since it's pretty consistent, and once again aim high so you have the highest chance of chopping their head off. This weapon swings pretty quick too, so you might be able to out damage a gun at close range if you get the jump on them, but you need to manage your stamina since prepping a third swing is nearly half of your stamina. Next up, the chainsaw. I'm not going to lie to you all, I think this weapon is complete trash. The biggest counter to this weapon is just jumping on something. But because it's a high tier melee, I'm going to talk about it. If you somehow manage to get the drop on someone with this loud ass tool, make sure you have at least 35 stamina so you can swing this thing once, and you'll probably kill them. I'm not even going to talk about the sledgehammer because I think this thing is fucking useless, but we do have a guest appearance from the Rambo knife. This thing is a little demon, and it's genuinely so powerful. The hitbox is solid, and no joke, I've killed AKs with this thing before. The best strat is just to rush your target and overwhelm them before they can kill you. But with all that being said, I think that's everything I can offer regarding melee weapons. Thank you for watching. All support is extremely appreciated.